Thank you, Ivor Shapiro, for your nomination and your very kind introduction. Chancellor Bloomberg, President Levy, Provost Lachemy, deans, esteemed colleagues and representatives sharing this stage, beloved family members and dear friends, and triumphant members of the graduating class, thank you. It is a pleasure and a great honor to be here. I live in San Francisco now, and I was coming in the airport last night, and the customs guy, who was very young, asked me where I worked, and when I told him, he said, "Oh," and he smiled, and he said, I got through school because of Wikipedia. And so I thought that just might be somewhat true for some of you, and so for those for whom that is true, you're welcome, and we're glad we could help. Ivor Shapiro did a great introduction because I do want to talk with you today about change. So as I was getting ready for today, I was thinking about my own graduation from the School of Journalism here in 1990. And what I remember is that about half my class had a pretty good sense of certainty about what we wanted to do with our lives, and about half of us were frankly kind of terrified. And I have a message for both camps. So for those of you who are befuddled, I want to say you are right to be, because your future isn't knowable. And for those of you who, like I was, who are certain, you are wrong. Whatever it is that you think you're going to do with your life, you're almost certainly wrong. And I say that because I graduated from this institution 23 years ago, and I thought I was going to spend my entire career making radio documentaries. And today I run the organization that operates Wikipedia. And 23 years ago, Wikipedia didn't exist, and the internet didn't even exist. So things changed for me, and they're going to change for you too. It's a cliche, and yet it's also true to say that change is inevitable. Everything is always changing, and people tend to talk about change in a kind of a fearful way. So they'll say, how can you ensure that your skills are up to date, or how can you survive, how can you stay employable? And I think that that's the wrong way to think about it. When I went to school here in the late 80s, we learned the craft of journalism using manual typewriters. We put together the school newspaper using glue sticks and pieces of paper that we cut up with X-Acto knives. And we literally cut audio tape with razor blades and spliced it together manually. When I graduated, I went to work in radio, which was a medium that had been invented, I think, in the 20s, maybe the 30s. Radio probably peaked in terms of its money and its quality and its excellence and its influence in about 1975. So all of that sounds very quaint today, right? It sounds kind of absurd. What happened to me, what happened to the people who graduated with me? In the late 1980s, the federal government started slashing the CBC's budget, and that set in motion a kind of a death by 1,000 cuts that's still continuing today. About a decade after that, the internet was invented, and that started to usher in a golden age of access to information that was better than anything we had ever seen. It was awesome. We are so much better off because of it, and I know that because I existed before it, and I remember what it was like. But the internet also plunged into chaos the news and entertainment industries. Our business models started to break, our audiences and our influence started to decline, jobs got scarce, and respected institutions everywhere started to fold or struggle. That kind of thing is going to happen to you like it's happened for the generations that preceded you. If you talk with older people, a lot of them will tell you that they spent the last decade or 2 or 3 of their working careers shepherding their institution or their industry through its last declining years. It's really common. So what I want to do today is give you 3 pieces of advice on how I think you can thrive during changing times. So first, you want to work with the best quality people you can find, regardless of where they are. So when I graduated, I went straight to work for CBC Radio. The CBC is legendary, and it was legendary then. But even so, the people there were better. They were smarter, they were more thoughtful, and more dedicated than I could possibly have imagined. So there's a famous old story about a CBC radio documentary maker who was covering the 1986 elections in the Philippines. He was in downtown Manila. There's a river that cuts through the city, and he was leaning over a bridge, twisted kind of precariously, dangling his microphone down towards the water 6 or 7 feet, so he could get close enough to record the sound of the river. And a BBC correspondent walks by and says, "Oh, hey, you're from the CBC." The CBC was internationally known. It was the place that believed that if you were going to use a sound up of a babbling brook for 4 seconds in the background of your 20-minute radio documentary, you had an ethical obligation to use the actual sound of the actual river. That's pretty good. So you will decide for yourselves what quality means for you. I liked the kind of people who would risk falling into a river and drowning because they cared so much about accuracy and about truth. Quality might mean something different for you, and that's fine. But that's the first thing. You want to find and work with people who you admire. The second thing, and I ask you please to forgive me, moms and dads, for saying this, you should ignore your parents. Perhaps more precisely, you should separate out stuff that your parents say that is permanently, enduringly useful from stuff that is not. So my parents taught me public service values. That I am eternally grateful to them for. It shaped everything that I do, and it shaped everything that I am. My parents also believe that the CBC is awesome, and they are going to continue to believe it long after it stops being true. When I started working for Wikipedia, my parents, I think, were a little bit confused. They had heard of it, and they had maybe read it once or twice, but I don't think that they thought it was very important, and they were wrong. So if you listen too much to what older people tell you, you're always going to be oriented towards the past. You're going to be living in the world of your parents' young adulthood, and that's not going to be a good guide for you. Their judgment isn't going to be perfect, and that means that even though you love them and you respect them, you want to also learn to trust yourself. In order to trust yourself, you need to know yourself, and that brings me to my third point. You probably can't really know yourselves really, really well yet because you're still in the process of constructing yourselves, but you want to pay attention to your own signals. So I, for example, was a very bossy child. It was important to me to be in charge, and so now I'm a boss of things. I have a super energetic friend who gets bored really, really easily, and so she channeled that into working for startups, and so she travels around the world and she does different things every few weeks, and she's really happy with that. Another friend of mine is really into prestige. When she says where she works, she wants other people to be impressed by it, and so because that's what she wants and she knows it, she works really hard and she is very happy. So whatever it is that motivates you, don't make the mistake of being ashamed of it or wishing that it were different. Just find work that gives it to you. As you go through your working life, pay attention to the aspects of it that you're enjoying and design your life so that you get more of them. I want to say one last thing. People sometimes like to think that we're not defined by our jobs. I think that's nonsense. We spend more time at our work than we do doing practically anything else. And so if we're lucky, our work is going to be very much informed by who we are. And so I think that just like you want to be a good neighbor and a good friend and a good family member, I think you want at work to be a good person. You might think that that doesn't matter because your work isn't really you, but I think that if the net effect of your work is to make people's lives worse, not better, for any reason, because you yell at people, or because instead of speaking up, maybe you're silent and you encourage stupidity, or because you sell people junk that they don't need, that is who you are. It's you doing that. You can't separate out your work self from your real self because they're the same thing. And so I'm going to leave you with two quotes from the great American novelist Kurt Vonnegut. "There's only one rule I know of," Kurt Vonnegut had his protagonist say in a baptismal speech to a set of twins. He said, "God damn it, babies, you have got to be kind." And then, writing as a fictitious writer who finds himself making propaganda for the Nazis, Kurt Vonnegut wrote this: "Be careful who you pretend to be, because who you pretend to be is who you are." I wish you every success. You're going to have more fun than you could ever possibly have imagined. It's going to get better and better and better and better. On this very important day, when you start to reap the rewards of the work and the sacrifices of many years, I want to wish you all the best of luck and congratulations.